Tobacco, tobacco, sing sweetly for tobacco. Tobacco is like love, oh, love it, for you see, I will prove it.
The music you just heard, aptly named Tobacco, is a 1605 piece by Tobias Hume that sets traditional song to music. In it, the singer claims that tobacco is like love, and, with characteristic wit, goes on to make such comparisons as, "'Tis fond love often makes men poor, so doth tobacco." For context, this is the kind of clay pipe that might be used in the early modern period. Notice the small bowl. In contrast, a tavern pipe of the Victorian era has a much larger bowl because there's more access to tobacco. In Hume's time, tobacco is more expensive, and so you would tamp your bowl with a smaller pinch. So, love and tobacco are both expensive. Anyone who's bought a carton of cigarettes knows this is true. But is tobacco really like love? In the poems this week, you'll read and think about the relationship between tobacco and love and ask if Hume truly has proved it. You read examples of lyrical smokers who oppose the love of smoking to the romantic love of another person. The same Rudyard Kipling, who wrote the Jungle Book, also wrote a few poems about smoking in this way. In Maid of the Meerschaum, Kipling presents a meerschaum pipe as a loyal lover and goes so far in Betrothed to liken marital love stinking and still. Kipling's words, not mine. To the butt of a dead cigar. Years earlier, the romantic poet John Clare follows a similar line of thought in his song on tobacco. For Clare, tobacco is every smoker's best friend in his need, so he opts to sing tobacco, much like Hume does in his own time. Whereas the smoker is tormented with care by his daily companion, a troublesome wife, again, Clare's words, not mine. A pipe of tobacco will soothe his despair as the peaceful companion through trouble and strife. Look out for, if you ever see the wife strife line rhyme, it's kind of a concern. We find the same troubling misogyny in a submission to Pearson's Weekly. That's an 1890-1891 publication, so Victorian era magazine. They had a pipe competition, and a certain Mr. Charles Smith submitted the winning poem of 1891. You can read that poem in the course shell. And this poem muses how a pipe is like a friend in need that drives away trouble, like, you probably guessed it, a wife. Whether the pipe drives away one's spouse or takes the place of the spouse as one who drives away trouble, smoke is understood relationally. It replaces the romantic relationship in these poems. In that way, tobacco is like love, since it's depicted as a potential relationship. Or is it? By now, you've already brainstormed in your free writing what you imagine smoking communities are like. Or, if you are a member of one of the diverse kinds of smoking communities, you've reflected on your experience. Look for this relational aspect of the figure of smoking throughout the text we read. As you refine that original brainstorming, think about what these depictions suggest about gender and class, or whether the very smoke in the air visualizes bonds between smokers or inhibits the smoker's ability to build relationships with others and form communities. However we read the act of smoking, we're united in the assumption that it is an act that can be read, something that can be interpreted. This puts us in the realm of hermeneutics, or the method of interpretation. And that's why each week we're going to explore a potential methodology you can use to uncover and make meaning with these texts. So hold on, next in this video, we're going to talk about a general theory of gestures by Willem Flusser. The late media theorist Willem Flusser noted that the defining feature of pipe smokers is in their reliance on pockets. You need a pocket for your pipe, another for your tobacco pouch, yet another for your matches or your lighter, and you can never forget your tamping tool. That's this little guy right here. Very useful tool. It's almost like owning a set of ritual objects. All are necessary to enable the contemplative act of smoking a pipe, but none are prescribed or legislated as in a liturgy of an organized religion. We all need these tools, and of course, sufficient pockets to house them, but we may use them differently. One smoker may swear by tamping the first layer of tobacco into the bowl just so. Another will always wait for the sulfur to slowly burn off the head of the match, while still another will use any lighter at hand. Flusser saw these idiosyncratic uses of tools as gestures. Now, it's the same word we use gestures for gestures of our hands, or even metaphorically. And for Flusser, gestures are special ways of disclosing our being in the world. According to Flusser, gestures are not just movements of the body, since that includes involuntary movements, such as the beating of our hearts, but movements that are expressions of intention, and for which there's no satisfactory causal explanation. So now, without a causal explanation, a gesture becomes representative and concerned with meaning. You can't mechanically pinpoint with precision the cause of why I'm moving my hands, but you can interpret it along with my gesture of speaking. So how I engage in the gesture of pipe smoking, how I use the pipe and tamping tool, how I keep it lit, whether I hold it with my hands or with my teeth, all of these are gestures that can be interpreted for meaning. As Flusser puts it, we read gesture from the slightest movement of facial muscles to the most powerful movements of masses of bodies called revolutions. But how do I read and interpret these gestures? According to Flusser, there are three forms of gesture: work, communication, and ritual. As he puts it, we stylize ourselves through gestures with respect to the world, work, to others, communication, and to ourselves, ritual. For Flusser, pipe smoking falls under ritual gestures. Unlike religious rituals, he presents smoking as a profane ritual that offers the pleasure of a ritualistic or artistic life without the same rigor. But then, what is this pleasure of smoking? Have you ever asked someone, why do you smoke? Maybe they'll say it relaxes them, or that they enjoy it, or that they really just like being able to talk with other smokers or read a poem that has a theme like that later on in the course. It all comes down to some sort of enjoyment. Flusser argues that the enjoyment isn't in the experience of the smoke or in any isolated part of the gesture, but rather to act out one's own being, is how he puts it. The pleasure in smoking a pipe does not have one or another specific cause. Rather, the pleasure comes from the gesture, from acting oneself out. This is an experience of one's own individuation and uniqueness, what is sometimes called thisness in philosophy. How you are yourself and no other. In Flusser's words, to act out also means to project an existence that is one's own, very particular and comparable to no one else's. As Flusser continues, in other words, pipe smoking is a gesture that permits us to find ourselves in the world through our own style. And that is what is meant by the answer, it is a pleasure. Relating pipe smoking back to other ritual and religious forms of life, Flusser concludes that some people smoke pipes for the same reason some people are artists, others monks, and still others prophets, namely, to act themselves out and find themselves. It's just that pipe smoking is far less demanding than a gesture of art, and even less demanding than the artistic gestures of religious ritual. So how does that relate to our class? Well, while reading the text throughout the term, think about how the characters, lyrical speakers, and smokers of all types are acting themselves out. And think about how we can, in Flusser's words, decipher the way we exist in the world through our interpretation of these gestures. And like all gestures, pipe smoking is not understood in isolation. It relies on the gesture of making, the movement of hands to change an object, such as this briarwood that was originally this briarwood into this pipe, or tobacco leaf into a cigar wrapper. There's the gesture of planting, which Flusser describes as the overture of waiting, through which we grow and harvest tobacco. And finally, there's the gesture of searching that we are engaged in as colleagues and researchers in the shared project of this class. Altogether, it's all about interpretation and meaning.
Tobacco is like love. Oh, love it, for you see I have proof.